All right, guys. So this video was recommended to me on the Discord by Tyler, and I think this is going to be a lot about the stuff that I talk a lot about on this channel. So let's watch it and let's see how we feel about it.
Okay, well, I guess it's time to admit it. I was wrong about MMOs.
Most
How
people
many
were.
times over the years in conversations about this genre have you heard the following? It gets good at endgame.
Yep.
Or what about this one? The
Yep.
real game starts at endgame.
100
I know
hours
I've
in.
heard this countless time. For many
Yep.
years, in fact, I've thought and said as much myself. That for the most part, MMOs, the game doesn't really get going until the max.
I'm worried I'm not going to have the chance to talk in here because I think he's going to do all the talking for me. I think that, to be completely honest with you, I think that he's going to say exactly the things that I've been saying for the past 3 or 4 months.
Level or until endgame. And there is some truth to that for sure.
Yeah.
There's a lot of truth to it. That's why it's said very often. So for example, in most MMOs, it's not until max level that you'll have things like your class's full suite of abilities and spells
Totally.
unlocked, or access to the most difficult content, be that the dungeons, raids, or PvP. And in doing those things, that's where you start acquiring the gear that often comes with additional build and playstyle altering effects. And with all of those elements, with all of those things coming together, it is at the end game when you really start to master your class, be that getting better at executing your rotations or
Sure.
increasing your reaction time and expanding your game knowledge in dungeon mechanics or PvP matchups, whatever the case may be. There is a whole extra layer of things that, while they might not be exclusive to endgame, they certainly start to come together. Everything starts coming online and is far more focused at the end game in MMOs. On top of that, having a good amount of fleshed out endgame content, that is vital for any MMO that hopes to have long.
So the way that MMOs work is that you play through this entire long, drawn-out process, and then eventually you get to what's called endgame. And endgame is a situation that you find yourself in which you are theoretically at the maximum capacity of what you're capable of doing inside of this game. You have all of the gear that you're going to need, mostly. You have all the skills being shown to you. You have the full suite of everything that you have to do. And then you've done a bunch of the content that involves the leveling process, getting new gear, experiencing the story, doing all of these things. And now you're at what we call endgame. And endgame is the place where you now go out and you do the hardest content that's in the game. You test your skills, you sort of push yourself to get better a little by little, incrementally, and you become the player who is the ultimate Chad in the video game. That's what an MMO pushes for a lot of times. And over the years, because this is the content that most people sit at for a super long time, all those people that you've met over the years in World of Warcraft who've been playing since launch, dude, they were there since before alpha, dude. They were there when the game was conceived, dude. They were in the room and they were already playing a version of it, dude. Those people have been at endgame for so unbelievably long that they've now believed and they are convinced of the fact that endgame is the only thing worth doing because it's the main thing that they've been able to experience. The only new content that they get to experience is the in-game content that comes out because that's how the situation works. They've already gone through everything. They don't have anything else to do there. So when you come in as a new player and you're looking for advice on how to get into this game, the advice that you're going to come across all the time is, well, here's the easiest way to get to endgame, dude. Here's the quickest way. Here's the optimal way of getting there. And you're given this idea and you start to believe that you have to rush through all this content that the game has put there over these decades of being around, that all of that is now useless and that you need to get to endgame as quickly as possible. And in fact, a lot of the developers and a lot of MMOs have now started to make that the case. In World of Warcraft, the content that people spent hundreds of thousands of man-hours working on over the past 2 decades is now being circumvented by super quick leveling up mechanics, and they do not care about that content anymore. They do not think that you should play it. They think that you should be in the latest patch doing all the catch-up mechanics and trying to grind gear for the next big boss that's going to come out. I am of the belief that that is the reason that people do not enjoy MMOs anymore, because they don't feel like the game is the game. They feel like the game is a thing that's always going to happen in the future. And if you play through a game with that mentality, you will never notice when you're having a good time. It is what happens. You will never build a bond with this game because you feel like you never got to the place where the game actually started. The game started the second that you logged in, and whether or not you enjoy it is up to everything that has to do with you. Are you going to sit sit there and try to learn the mechanics? Are you going to figure out what the feel of this game is? Are you going to vibe with it in the right way? All of those little things that happen. And you as a person has to sort of understand that. It's the same problem with RuneScape. It's the same problem with World of Warcraft. It's the same problem with every MMO. If you go into it with the wrong mindset, the one that's being pushed to us all the time, you are going to have a bad time with those games. The game is the game. That's what we say all the time over in the Discord and everything and in the streams. The game is the game. There is no thing in the future. There is no money and clout and women and all those things in the future. The game is what you have, and the game is the game.
Long-term success. Like, it takes developers 5 to 10 years to build the leveling process that in many cases nowadays, the hardest of hardcore players are finishing in under a week's worth of time.
Yeah.
So yes, you need that
You can get to World of Warcraft level cap in like a day if you want to.
repeatable endgame PvE
Earlier, quicker,
and
2 hours
PvP
sometimes.
content to be solid, to be really well thought out if you want those players to stick around after that first few weeks and that first month, which for most MMO developers, they do want that because they have recurring income sources via things like subscriptions, battle passes, or season passes and the like. They would like you to keep on playing, so you keep on paying. This keeps the lights on, and ideally, it means the game will continue to get supported. So yes, endgame is very important.
And it's very
I'm not
fun.
denying that, but I also think that in focusing so heavily on the end game, we've also lost sight of the fact that the journey to that point needs to also be good, and that is what I was wrong about. It gets good at end game, doesn't cut it. In fact, I would
not at
argue
all.
that a major reason many new MMOs have failed over this past 10, 15, or 20 years is because that
leveling
journey
process
to
is
max
boring.
level is phoned in. It is paint by numbers of an experience and seems to be made the way that it often is because, I don't know, MMOs have always been designed this way, and that's how it sort of feels. And if we ever
I wanted to play World of Warcraft when I was a kid, not because of the fact that there was in-game raids that would happen. I didn't even know what a raid was. The first time I ever heard the term raid was from this kid in my middle school who played a lot of World of Warcraft. He had rich parents, I'm assuming. And he said, you know, you can do raids, and raids are really cool. Raids. You know, you need healers for raids. You need tanks for... I had no idea what a raid was. I was like, ooh, a raid? Are you guys, like, raiding other players? Are you, like, Vikings? Like, what's that? I had no idea. I wanted to play World of Warcraft because the world of Azeroth looked really cool to walk around in. Because I saw a video one time of a guy standing on top of a waterfall. Because I saw a video of a guy walking down a big staircase in some dark-looking land with glowing eyes and a staff on his back that had, like, dark magic swirling around it. That's why I wanted to play World of Warcraft. That's still why I keep coming back to World of Warcraft, because I want to see what's inside of that place.
ever hope to rekindle the magic of the MMO genre, and I think we can, and certainly we will one of these days. But first, in order for that to happen, these games need to start putting more thought into the journey to endgame.
They need to
It
be
shouldn't
video
just
games
be
again.
a footnote. It shouldn't just be something that you get through before things get good. The game needs to be good right away, and it needs to be good all along the way. And even more so, I don't think we should be breezing through this process either.
No.
What exactly am I talking about? Well, I'll tell you after a word from today's sponsor, New World. Today's video is sponsored by New World Aeternum. The game is getting an update along with, at long last, a full-on console
play New World
release
really
with
bad.
cross-platform functionality between PC, PS5,
I would love to do a review of New World Tournament. I haven't ever played the game, but I play a lot on console. I'd
and
love to
Xbox
do that.
Series X and S. So everything from the original game will be here, but also there's some additions, changes, and improvements, including entirely new features and systems. The new content includes a 10-man raid, new PvP zone, repeatable endgame soul trials, cross-world arenas, and a revamp to the Cutlass Keys zone with new questing and enemies. There's also some quality of life features. They've added swimming to the game, made combat improvements, and to go along with the console release, there is now full native controller support and a host of accessibility features. So this
Very
coming
cool.
weekend, they're hosting
They
a
needed that.
cross-platform beta test. It is fully open beta with no buy-in, so anyone who's interested can jump in and check it out for free. The beta will include the new changes to the early game story and progression, and it lets you level up to a cap of 30, which gives you the chance to check out all the new content up to that point, which includes arenas, the faction system, mounts, and the first early game dungeon. If you would like to check
Sort of looks like Elder Scrolls Online a lot.
out New World Aeternum and see some of this new content yourself, you can pre-download the open beta on Steam, Xbox, or PlayStation 5 after 9 a.m. Pacific time on September the 11th, with the beta officially going live on September 13th. Okay, so I'm going to give you a quick quiz here, okay? What MMO am I talking about? So the game starts out after character creation with you loading into a humble little village. There's a nearby NPC who has a quest marker right above their head with a task for you to go complete in the nearby area. You finish that quest and are then pointed to a camp further beyond where you find a pair of NPCs who also need help. And then before you know it, you've completed a bunch of quests, you've killed some wildlife monsters and bandits, you've leveled up a few times, you've moved through a handful of hubs and explored all the areas in the starting zone. You are then directed to a nearby adjacent zone, which is a bit visually different from the last one, and here you find yet another NPC with another quest. And this whole thing takes you somewhere in the vicinity of 1 or 2 hours, give or take. You repeat the process in this second zone, and then roughly 1 to 2 hours later, you find yourself arriving in the third zone, and you rinse and repeat this process until you eventually reach max level. Okay.
So, he's been showing a lot of footage from Elder Scrolls Online. Elder Scrolls Online, I think, is one of the best examples of a game that takes itself seriously as a video game and also as an MMO. I do not play Elder Scrolls Online because it is a good MMO. I play Elder Scrolls Online because it's a good Elder Scrolls game. And I know that that is sort of a controversial opinion, but as far as liking an Elder Scrolls game, enjoying the lore of that world, liking to be out there and experience things, having the ability to train different skills up, to steal from people, to do all these different guild quest lines, to experience the world at your own pace and do all those things, it's great for that. There are so many different expansions. One of my favorite things to do if I get sick and I have to be down for a few days is to get on Elder Scrolls Online, pick a new expansion that I haven't done, or pick an expansion that I haven't done yet because there's so much content in that game, and then just going through that expansion over the course of 3 days. Fish for all the special fish that are in the area, get all the crafting achievements in it, experience all the storyline quests, get some new skins, find new weapons in there, figure out what's going on in the lore, experience the new skill line that came out in that, get a new companion if they have it, all those kinds of things. I love that. I think that it's such a good thing that it does. I could care less about the raids and the guilds and the in-game content in Elder Scrolls Online, and a lot of people really do, and they really love it, and they have 14,000, 20,000, 25,000 hours in Elder Scrolls Online. And to those people, Godspeed, do what you will. But for me, it's an Elder Scrolls game first and foremost. And I think that if more MMOs played that way, if they felt like a video game that you were actually playing the way Guild Wars 2 does, the way, honestly, kind of RuneScape does in a lot of ways, they would have a lot more success in the mainstream, and we wouldn't be seeing this decreasing player base of, 50,000 people playing a game a month is a huge deal in big numbers. World of Warcraft used to have 4 million, was it 4 million concurrent accounts? That's nuts, dude.
So what MMO am I talking about here? If you guessed retail WoW, you are correct. There's been a lot of discussion recently about how fast leveling is in this most recent expansion, with many players clocking in just shy of 10 hours to go from levels 70 to 80. But the war within aside, leveling hasn't been much difficult or time-consuming in retail WoW in a very long time, especially when you're starting a fresh character beginning at level 1. You are just blazing through these initial zones, going through several of them in under 5 hours. However, this isn't exactly specific to retail WoW, is it? Because if you thought I was talking about Lost Ark, you were correct. If you thought I was talking about the Elder Scrolls Online, you were correct. If you thought about Neverwinter, of Tarisland, if you thought I was talking about the upcoming release of Throne and Liberty, you were correct in all of those instances. If you thought I was talking about any of the failed MMOs over this past 10 or 15 years, you were correct. And if you were thinking of any in-development MMOs, I am guessing when we eventually play them in the next 5 to 10 years, we will learn you were probably also once again correct. The experience that I outlined here is near identical in so many of these games. But really, the part that I'm talking about isn't the questing hub portion. I don't think there's anything wrong with the design of questing hubs directing you through and around and then into the next zone. That in of itself isn't really a problem. Really, it's all about the speed in which this is happening and what you're doing within that time. And how fun it is. In so many modern MMOs, the leveling has been designed as a means to an end, something to get through as quickly as possible.
Why not just skip all the leveling? If what you want is for your people to get to endgame, why not just throw them in at endgame? Why not just make an MMO start you off at level 80 or whatever and just have your mastery points and all those things at the end? If that's the whole goal of your MMO, if that's everything that you want the player to do, then why not just start them there? And I think it's such a silly thing that developers do where they try to just speed you along through this phase of the game that is arguably the most fun. I think that leveling up in the MMO tends to be pound for pound the most fun you're going to have in an MMO. And if it takes you 40 hours, that 40 hours will be better than your next 40 hours at in-game. Guaranteed. Now, you can experience way more in-game over a long period of time, right? Like over 300, 500, 1,000 hours while you're at in-game, you will have a better time than you had during that 40 hours. But if you take any segment of 40 hours, unless you have a really good segment with like a sick raid or something, that 40 hours is going to feel like more of a chore than the first 40 hours because the dopamine flows like crazy while you're leveling up. You have a really simple goal. You don't even know why you're getting this goal done yet, but you're just level need to go up. Number need to go up. It need to go from 1 to 80. I need to get to 80. You get closer and closer to 80. You're at 45, and you're like, man, if I really play a lot tonight, I could get to 50 tonight. You get to 50, and then you start to get to 55, and then you feel the same way until you get to 60, and then you're like, I could really push this. I could get to level 80, and you end up around like 73 that night, and then you go to sleep, and you wake up the next day, and you're like, this is the day. This is the day I get to level 80. That's a really, really good feeling that you have over the course of 40 hours that you don't get in the next 40 hours of playing an MMO, and you have to find new ways to get that goal. It's much more cryptic as you get further into the MMO.
So you can start really playing the game. And that's where I think we've lost our way. We are so focused on getting to the quote good parts of MMOs that we are blazing through what should also be the good parts of the game.
Yeah.
Part of this can definitely be attributed to player mentality. Like there is a desire that people have to rush through to get to max level as quickly as possible. It's absolutely true.
Whatever direction a game steers you in, the majority of people are going to go in that direction. That's how that works.
Noticed it in my own play experience for sure, and I often see it talked about as being a big difference in the MMO player base nowadays versus say how it was 20 years ago. Now I want to make it clear, we had min-maxers back then as well, but generally we all sucked together. Like even the min-maxers in 2004 were by today's standards comparatively total and complete noobs. But player mentality aside, many of these games are now also just designed this way, where the leveling is structured and paced in a manner that it can be blazed through. I mean, currently, if you're starting brand new with a fresh character, you never played the game before, you can reach max level in the Elder Scrolls Online, for example, takes about 50 hours.
Yep.
Guild Wars 2 is like 30 to 35 hours. Yep. Retail WoW can take about 25 hours. Yep. Lost Ark's like 10 hours. And Throne and Liberty, that's like 6 or 5 hours. Now keep in mind, these are all very rough estimates. It's highly variable depending on player skill and also your play style. And on top of that, in many cases here, it can be much faster. You can reach max level in a lot of these games in like under 5 hours. And then of course, on the flip side, it can also take a whole heck of a lot longer. But as a rough guideline for people playing the game what we would consider normally as the developer intended, doing a quest, killing mobs, and going through the zones sort of like at a natural pacing, those rough estimates are generally what you can expect for each of these games. And these estimates are just so much more streamlined and fast-tracked and way faster pacing than what we saw in a lot of MMOs in the past. And I would argue that the faster leveling often equates to less time spent in each individual part of the world. You're spending less time in each of the zones as you go through them, and this has created less of a connection to these worlds. And that then results in a less immersive experience, and an MMO that isn't as immersive definitely loses much of the magic that
The reason why that first MMO that you ever played was your favorite for so long, the reason why the first time that you got lost in an MMO for a decade and that you really started to live in that world and experience it, the reason why that became your favorite has almost nothing to do with the game. It's about the way that you personally experienced it. It's about the things that you did in that world during that time. It was about being a kid and being unable to stay committed to a goal for long enough to achieve that goal really quickly. So you found new ways of distracting yourself from that goal. You went and hung out in different places. You talked to different people. You did different skills in order to distract yourself from this constant grind that you were on that was super boring. But as you get older, I think you start to develop this mentality and this mindset, this ability to grind on something. Anyone who's worked 70 hours a week at any point in their life knows what it means to do something you don't want to do, and it becomes second nature. So when you're leveling through these MMOs, you can sort of zone out and just go through it. There's plenty of footage of me playing Guild Wars 2 up to level cap where I'm, chat's going crazy and I'm talking to chat the whole time, and I can play that game without even looking at the screen hardly, just going around and doing the things I need to, and I got to level 80, dude. It's it's a whole different sort of experience that takes away an element from you. And in fact, now that I'm going back and playing a new character, I'm leveling up a thief in Guild Wars 2 right now, and like experiencing the game by being mostly focused on it, it's a whole different thing. But I still love to just go to a major city and just walk around and jump on things, jump on houses, jump on roofs. There's a place in Morrowind, right? So right outside of Vivek City, or right in Vivek City, right near the crafting station, where you can sort of jump up and get up on the rooftops up there, and then jump down, and there's the big forge right in the middle and all that. I've spent so much time just jumping around that thing. That area feels like a home to me now. I've spent so much time in Elder Scrolls Online that now Vivek City feels like a home to me. And I think that's a thing that you miss out on when you're just so focused on getting to raids, dude. Like, I don't know why people play video games if it's not to enjoy the video game. They say, well, I want my time to be respected. I want, to get something out of this. Dude, it's a video game. You're not getting anything out of it, period, full stop. The enjoyment of playing that game is the only thing that you have. There is no reward. There is no sack of money at the end.
That I think makes the genre great. I really do think that this is one
Play
of the
the
bigger
game.
problems with modern MMOs. There's a lot of factors that go into an MMO being good, but on top of all of those, the fact that we are blazing through 90% of the content so fast to get to the remaining 10% of the content as quickly as possible, which we naturally, inevitably grow tired of, because
Yes.
so much about MMO endgame basically
Is
equates
similar,
to doing
yeah.
the same things over and over and over again, doing the same dailies, going along the same farming routes, doing the same PvP battlegrounds, and running the same dungeons. So not too long ago, there was a new game revealed called Fellowship. It is called a multiplayer online action game with what they say has endlessly scaling dungeons. The idea here is that the entire thing is basically just MMO-inspired endgame dungeon runs, as if you were to take World of Warcraft, pull out all the Mythic Plus content, and then just have that be its very own game. So when describing Fellowship, the developer, Chief Rebel, says, you can jump into the endgame content straight away, and you don't have to spend hours and hours grinding just to get to the fun stuff. Now, I am going to check out Fellowship. I actually think it looks quite interesting, and it could be a lot of fun on its own. But when thinking about MMOs in particular, I realized that I don't agree that the best part of the genre
100%.
is running its dungeons over and over and
Force.
over again. That is fun for sure. Like, I enjoy that
Totally.
content. The process of stepping into a dungeon for
This is where you bond with the people. This is where you make the friends. This is where you hang out with the guild. This is where you know everyone's personality.
the first time, and then going through it, learning its in and outs, run after run, learning every mob and boss encounter until you eventually have every single engagement memorized. That whole arc up to the point of getting a dungeon to farm status, that process can be very enjoyable. It is very enjoyable. I like it, but it's not my favorite part of
No,
MMOs.
leveling's my
and I
favorite
don't
part.
even think it's the most fun part either. For me, my
Exploration,
favorite
learning the
part, what
world.
I like the most about this genre, is the world and everything
Yep.
that happens within it as you play,
Force and I have a lot of the same ideas about this stuff. Good
as
for
you
him.
discover, and as you learn the game. So much of that can, and I think should be, while going through the exploring and leveling process for the first time. I don't want to be in and out of a zone in under 2 hours like we see in a lot of MMOs
Totally.
nowadays. I want to steep in it. I want to be immersed. And I think that is, like I said, a big part.
That's something really interesting that Old World of Warcraft really had down pat, is that because the zones were difficult and because the wrong steps could get you killed so quickly, you could pull 4 mobs at once and be overloaded and just be destroyed, and you had to learn to run away and fight things as you ran and fear things and freeze things and polymorph things in order to get away from them. It really taught you how to deal with it. You spent a lot of time dying in a lot of those places, dude. I mean, the earliest example I can think of in World of Warcraft is Hogger, right? Like the first time that you ever fight Hogger, it is really, really dangerous because you have no idea that you can just be wiped by a mob at that point, and he has, people around him that you'll accidentally pull trying to run away, or even running into a group of Murlocs, and then just pushing yourself deeper into a body of water, not realizing that there's a whole bunch of them swimming down there and you're going to pull them too. There's so many little things like that you pick up as he said, steep in that area and really learn the in and outs of it.
Of what's been lost with leveling being streamlined and us being fast-tracked.
You don't know anything about these games, that you just get to the end game really quickly, and that's why people don't like World of Warcraft. Dude, you know how many people that I've been around who have played World of Warcraft up to level 40 and they have no idea that it's a quick leveling experience because they're just like, this is boring and I don't want to do this. It's like, yeah, I get that, dude. They shepherd you through. It took me multiple characters of leveling up before I started to understand what that world felt like.
Straight into the end game dungeon farming as soon as possible. We are losing this massive chunk in the middle, and if that chunk's not engaging enough, then you also have the problem of people quitting before they even get to the end game. And to be precise, I'm not even talking about the aspect of leveling itself. There's nothing like inherently fun about getting the enough experience to go from levels 10 to 11. You get the process of slowly unlocking and kind of opening up your character as it gets more abilities, more passive and active spells. That is cool, but the fun part is the things that you're doing in the process while that power progression is also happening, because I'm really talking about exploring the world, discovering it.
Well, it's twofold, right? So it's kind of a system that's going on there. This is the thing that you have to understand about a game when you're playing, or you don't have to, but this is the thing that I think about a lot when I'm playing a game, is that all the systems are working together to sort of push me through. It's a whole bunch of cogs that are moving a conveyor belt that I'm on and going to the end of it. And if all those cogs are going together perfectly, then I will easily get shepherded down the conveyor belt. If there's hitches, then I'll have to take some steps myself and like force myself to continue playing. And then sometimes a game completely stalls out and those cogs all fall apart and you just don't want to continue playing that game anymore. But it's everything. It's the little bit of dopamine from the leveling up. It's the fact that you're getting a new skill that now is working in your rotation. You're learning how to use it. Getting a really useful skill in an MMO feels so good when you finally get to that point that you have a new skill that's doing a lot of damage and it's a main one in your rotation. That feels so good, dude.
And engaging in things, moving through the zones, completing quests, grinding mobs, exploring the terrain, doing whatever activities the MMO has, and of course, ideally interacting with other players in some capacity along the way. These are the moments that would have created some of my best memories in all my time playing this genre. And I think when games are speeding up that process, they're speeding up the exploration and discovery of the world and the by virtue of the leveling, that we miss out on a lot of potential. So recently, Greg Street, also known as Ghostcrawler, touched on this topic. Previously, having worked on World of Warcraft and the Riot MMO, he is now the studio head of Fantastic Pixel Castle, who have their own new MMO in development. It's still like probably at least 5 years away, but they're working on a game. Now, last week, Greg posted the following thread in which he said, "Someone asked me if it's a mistake to streamline the leveling experience and let players get to endgame ASAP because that's what they love. My answer is yes. I think it's the leveling."
People don't know what they love. You think they do. Don't listen to people's advice on the internet. They have no idea. They genuinely don't. They can't explain to you why it's fun. I remember getting to level cap in World of Warcraft and going, what do I do next, on a Reddit thread, and getting all these answers from people and then asking them, why should I do that? And them going, I don't know, it's just what people do. They don't know. They're just regurgitating a bunch of stuff that they've heard a whole bunch of times and they haven't thought about it very much. That's why they're posting. That's why they're commenting on Reddit, honestly. No offense. Listen, I comment on Reddit as well, but like the majority of people, dude, go and look at some of their post karma. They have one thing that they say and they do it all over the place, dude.
We all fell in love with and invested in MMOs.
It's their thing.
He is absolutely on point with that statement. I 100% agree. And then he went on to say, I think getting to level cap should be an accomplishment and not a blip. The end game is very, very important, and a lot of MMOs fail because they have a good leveling experience and a lame end game, so we won't forsake that. I'll push back here and say that I don't think a lot of modern MMOs actually do deliver on a good leveling experience. They have a phoned in leveling experience, like I said, and then an end game that also doesn't hold up. Obviously, the MMOs that have stuck around over this past 10, 15, 20 years, they have delivered that in some sense, but a lot of the ones that have come and gone, they have failed at both the end game, but also the leveling and immersion. And then he wraps up by saying, but I also think the leveling should be challenged.
Games are not just a bunch of systems that go together. You cannot just replicate what something else is doing. You have to understand what makes a video game fun. You have to be good at designing encounters. You have to be good at putting together a world that's interesting to be in. You have to be good at making quest lines that at least keep people engaged a little bit. You have to be good at making gear that looks cool. You have to be good at giving people challenge that they can see in the future but not able to do currently, so they have something to work to. You have to be good at finding players who are really, really into your game that get better than everybody else and can make content about it. There's so many things about video games that people don't get because it's a lot. It's really, really complicated, and like the majority of people are just there grinding out the thing because they want the clout or whatever. Like that happens a lot of times. And dude, I mean, I hear people talk sometimes, and it's like they just have a guide inside of their head, or a video that they've watched inside of their head, and they're just like, this would be a fun thing to talk about. I can't wait to talk to other people. And it's like a lot of times like two AIs speaking to each other that are told to talk about like just Final Fantasy 14 or whatever.
Challenging and a bit of effort and not something you cruise through so that you can start raiding. Even when I was on WoW, I held this opinion. So taking what Greg said here, much of which I agree with, I think that a lot of MMOs would be best served doing the following. The trend of shortening the leveling process, I think, is the wrong direction. We should be extending the leveling process. And I am not suggesting just creating artificial grinds, but rather having engaging combat right from the get-go, and then filling the world with content so that the whole experience is fun from levels 1 all the way to max level. Let us spend time in these worlds. Let us get immersed. Have us be in these zones long enough so that we actually get to know them, rather than making a character and going from the Shire to the Gates of Mordor in 8 hours.
Yeah.
No, thank you. That's way too accelerated to really get invested in the space. And
Speaking of which, the Lord of the Rings Online, good MMO, dude. You guys haven't played Lord of the Rings Online? I wouldn't mind going back and playing Lord of the Rings Online again.
that's what I
Dungeons
want
Dragons
from my
Online, too.
MMOs. Because when leveling isn't set to 10x speed and you spend several after
My dog's barking. Tiff? Is Beemo down there barking? Is Beemo down there barking? Is she in there with you? Hold on 1 second, guys. All right, sorry guys, had to take care of my dog.
afternoons in one zone rather than just 1 or 2 hours, you can really get to know it, doing quests that send you back to prior areas, finding grinding spots, exploring and revisiting sections, discovering new things that you hadn't seen before while you're doing all of this. This whole thing can pull you in and again add a lot of immersion. I will also add here, I think traversal plays a big role. Slowing down the speed at which players can get from one end of the world to another helps also to create immersion. Fast travel can come into the equation, but I think if it does, it should be much later down the road. In fact, the most immersive MMOs that I've ever played have all relied heavily on real-time travel methods. So first, this is you walking with your character, but then introducing things like flight paths, ox carts, blimps, and trains, eventually getting access to your own personal mounts. But the traversal should not be me instantly going from the starter area, instantly fast traveling to the next area. I think at the very least, while
Elder Scrolls Oblivion style, where all of the main cities are unlocked right from the get-go for you to be able to warp around to, and you don't even know where they sit in the expanse of that world. That's a big thing. You have to. There is so many things in video games nowadays that are running counter to people actually having fun in them, and you have to exercise your own personal control in order to not use those things, like microtransactions in video games, like super quick circumvention of leveling processes such as boosts. All of these things go into the mechanics of these are there for convenience for people who have been playing this game for a really long time, but it's such a temptation for a person with a little bit of pocket money sitting around for them to just throw it into your game and skip the whole game that they actually paid money for to play in the
games
first
can
place.
have this and every game is different. I do think that takes away and pulls you out of the world immersion. And then also leaning into Greg's mention of difficulty as well, I agree that this is a big factor. I don't believe we need to go the route of having every mob in the open world require a full 5-man group with a tank healer and damage dealers. That's a bit much, but making the world so that it's dangerous enough so that players are best served occasionally working together, that is absolutely huge. It helps so much. This was made super evident last year playing hardcore classic WoW, where just one wrong move would mean your character's demise. But even in regular classic, the difficulty was at such a level that it almost forced a sense of community. And this 100%. Is how it was back in 2004. This is how it was in the MMOs that I played before WoW, and playing Asheron's Call and playing EverQuest and many of those pre-WoW MMOs. In many of these games, if you pulled one extra mob, if you pulled 2 mobs instead of 1, it probably resulted in a corpse run, which meant you losing time and having to go back to your character. And when everyone in the game has this same shared experience, you see people just naturally working together. Even if it is just quid pro quo, that's fine. It adds that sense of camaraderie and community. because we're all going through the same struggle. So slowing down the leveling, sticking to real-time travel speeds, that helps keep us immersed, and then making combat encounters enough of a challenge that the threat of dying is ever present. These things all really help to create a much more immersive experience on the journey to max level, and that immersion helps create many more memories, in my opinion. And yeah, when we get to the max level, as we've discussed, endgame is very important for long-term player retention. You need to have a good loop of activities and things for people to do. That is what's going to keep your most dedicated players active long-term, but it just feels like so many MMOs nowadays have made the leveling portion and getting towards endgame just a means to an end, instead of having that also be an actually enjoyable part of the experience. It's more of just something for you to suffer through. So yes, I fully admit I was wrong about MMOs. The real game doesn't start at endgame. It starts when we first log in,
100%.
and the best MMOs
Been
I've
saying it
ever
forever.
played do a good job of making that journey to endgame memorable and immersive, and I am looking forward to whatever new MMO comes along that does this once again as well, because I think there's a lot of elements that go into.
We have to get back to the point to where we're making a video game first, and then the MMORPG is just the method of which we are bringing through that video game. This is the thing that people don't get. MMORPGs were becoming a thing back in the day because people really enjoyed RPGs. In the PlayStation 1 era, RPGs were reigning supreme. It started in Super Nintendo. Some of the best games on that console are considered to be Final Fantasy VI, Final Fantasy III, and Chrono Trigger. And then it really took over in PS1. Go and look at some of the top PS1 games, the top 200 PS1 games or whatever, and look at how many of those are RPGs and JRPGs. It was really, really popular back in the day. And because these games were so popular that never had really any kind of co-op, we wanted to have some kind of way to play these games with our friends. So the MMORPG genre came about because of advances in networking technology, working in tandem with the way that the video game business was really going. And that's why these games came about. They were supposed to be good video games that we could play with our friends, and that we needed to group up with other people in order to complete the hardest content in them. That's what made MMORPG so special. And now it has become a parody of itself, a genre that is feeding from tropes that have come about because of the way that characters and people have decided to play them to make them more optimal, because they had already spent thousands and thousands of hours in them. They do not care about bringing new people in. They expect you to have a certain fluency in the language that is what an MMORPG is. They expect you to know already what raids are, what leveling is. They expect you to know how to read your stats and get your gear up. There is no pretending anymore that these aren't things that we already know, and because of that, they just completely alienate a new player in a way that is just super alarming and destructive to the genre as a whole. And I want MMORPGs to stick around forever. I absolutely love these games, and I want to be able to play World of Warcraft when I'm 70 years old. I want to be able to play RuneScape when I'm 70. I want to be able to play Guild Wars 2, Final Fantasy 14, and Elder Scrolls Online. I want to have all these options around for me, but we have to get back to making the game fun for people who have either played a little bit or never played before at all, because those are the people who become the people in the future that are like us right now. That's how it starts.
Having a good MMO, you need that good end game, you need the repeatable content, and even though we're repeating that content over and over and over again, we're farming the same dungeons, we're doing the same raids, we're engaging in PvP in the same areas, we're going along the same resource gathering routes, we're crafting the same items 100 times, even though there's a repetition innate to endgame and MMOs, the MMOs that make that repetition feel fresh in some capacity, mixing things up in some way, those are the ones that have a lot of success, and players tend to stick around with the end game. But there's so much that goes into it, right? You need to create an interesting world. You need a good combat. You absolutely need good combat. It needs to be snappy, engaging, and have a visceral feel to it. And you can even do that in tab target games, because there are tab target games that do a really good job of tab target and ones that do a really terrible job at it. Upcoming MMO might give you a example of the bad, although I've heard Thorn and Liberty's gotten a little bit better. But anywho, there's a lot that goes into making a good MMO, but I really wanted to just discuss this portion of it, and that's the fact that it seems like so many games in the past 10 years in particular have just made leveling like an afterthought, right? And they haven't created these immersive experiences by design, partially by player impetus, by players' desire to get to max level as soon as possible. But developers need to design the games in a way that force that immersion, that force that slowing down, that create that more memorable experience. That's just my opinion. Hopefully we get another one of these sometime in the next decade. We'll see. That's going to do it for today's video, though. Thank you as always for watching. Hope you enjoyed it.
Give the video a like and subscribe to it if you haven't already. Force Gaming is a really cool guy, and his channel is great, and he makes lots of really good content. This is a thing that I preach about. It's honestly one of the foundational blocks that my channel has been built on so far, is the concept that this sort of thing that we've been fed by the MMO community over the past 5, 6, 7, 8 years is failing us in a whole lot of ways, and the only way to truly have longevity in these games and to enjoy what you're doing in them is to take it a little bit slower and to play the game as if you're trying to play the game, not as if you're trying to get to some point in the future of the game where all of a sudden now you can play the game for some reason. You're just learning bad habits that are going to ruin your enjoyment of the genre in some kind of way. And I think that people sort of know that at the end of the day. We talk to these new MMO players and we talk to these people who are new to games as if they've already been through the same experiences that built us. We have a really hard time looking back into our lives before we had gotten to endgame, before we had done this leveling process, and we have a hard time understanding what it was like to be those people with fresh eyes and a jaw drop down to the floor the first time that you walk into Varrock, and it's such an important thing to really come back to and understand and to reconnect with yourself in order to be able to help people get into these genres, because if you really love them, you need more people in them. MMOs are best when experienced with friends, and I love the idea of getting back to a place where we have millions of people playing these games, not tens of thousands of people playing these games every day. So yeah, that's the video, guys. I hope that you guys enjoyed it, and I'll see you guys on the next one. Be safe out there. Bye.